Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Embrace Fertility podcast slash YouTube channel. We are back going through our fabulous interviews with wonderful women who are there to support you on your journey. Today, we have Maida Getman, who is a donor conception coach, having been through her own infertility challenges, 4 IUIs, and 3 rounds of fresh IVF. Her and her husband Michael conceived their 2 daughters with the help of donor eggs. Maida today is going to share her own journey through infertility and using donor eggs, and then talk to us about her work as a donor conception coach and her amazing online course, the Donor Down Low, supporting people when they are considering and going through donor conception. Maida, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. So excited to be here.
And it's so fun because we've been talking about doing this interview for a few months, and then so many things have been happening. But it just feels like the perfect time for you to just come in and speak to my listeners, because there are a lot of people who kind of don't really know anything about the donor process, what it's like to go through it. So today is going to be fascinating for us to really dive into this and cover so many different angles. So to
Yeah,
start with, could you just tell us your own story about what happened for you?
of course. So Michael and I got married in 2012, and I like to say, luckily for us, we learned very early on that we were going to have trouble conceiving, and that was because Michael was being treated for a separate medical issue, and part of that was to do a sperm analysis. And so we learned really early on that he had low sperm count and low motility. So we were like, okay, like this is going to be harder for us. And so went to the doctor, and they were like, well, you're great, so let's do IUI. And we're like, great, it's going to work. Why wouldn't it work? um, 4 IUIs in, the doctor said, yeah, this this isn't working, something else is going on, and sent us to, so we did that through my regular doctor, and then we went to see a reproductive endocrinologist. And we did that workup, and I remember them being like, well, maybe IVF, but everything's looking pretty good. And then I got a phone call at work, and it was the doctor's office, and essentially they were like, your AMH, excuse me, your AMH is almost non-existent. And I was like, okay, I don't really know what that means. Like, okay. And they said, well, IVF is your next option. And I was like, okay. Felt pretty crushed by that news, but also Michael and I are very much doers, right? So it's like, okay, obstacle, let's just go over it. Okay, what do we need to do? Like IVF, okay. So we ended up actually getting a second opinion about our case, mostly because as soon as we were told we had to do IVF, we found out that we were moving. I'm from the US. We were living in Seattle, and we were moving to Minnesota, which is like 2,500 miles. Like, it's far. It's not like down the street.
Yeah.
So we started up with a clinic here in Minneapolis, and they were like, yep, IVF is your next choice. So jumped right into IVF, did our first round, got 1 embryo to transfer at day 5, did that transfer, and then we had no embryos to freeze. They all stopped dividing before we could freeze them. And we got a negative beta. So we jumped right into another round, same result. So got an embryo to transferred the embryo, no embryos to freeze. And at that point, our doctor brought up the idea of donor egg. She thought that our case was an issue with egg quality, that my egg quality wasn't good. She said that she thought we could probably conceive with my eggs doing like 8 to 10 rounds of IVF.
Whoa.
Um, and but that donor egg might be the better option for us. So we had decided that we would do 3 rounds and then kind of reevaluate. So we did that 3rd round, 3rd time not a charm, same result, an embryo to transfer, negative beta, 0 embryos to freeze. And so at that point, we made the decision to start down the path of donor. So we, at the time, there was about a 6-month wait for a donor through our clinic, which is the way that we went. There's a bunch of different ways you can go to find a donor. So we got on the wait list. We really spent the next 6 months like grieving, processing. I was not ready to move to donor when we got on the list, the waiting list. There was no, we didn't have to do much to get on the list. There was no cost to getting on the list. So we could be on the list while we were kind of trying to decide, is this truly the path we wanted to go down? And by the time we were matched with a donor, we were like, yep, this seems like the best option for us. So got matched with a donor, did a fresh cycle with her. So synced my cycle to her cycle, transferred 2 embryos right before Thanksgiving 2015. And no, yeah, 2015. And then got a positive beta, and a couple weeks later found out it was twins, and here they are. They're almost 5 now. So I mean, that's a very short version, right, to a very long and grueling and emotional process, but that's basically how it happened.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And the point that really jumps out to me is, like you said, you when you got on that waiting list, you weren't emotionally ready. And this is something that I work with clients, that they can be going through going through treatment with their own eggs, and then yeah, the doctor suggests maybe start to consider donor, and it can feel like such a massive jump to go from 1 month you're doing treatment with your own eggs, and then they're saying, oh, hang on, maybe we need to go to this whole other step. Could you talk to us a bit more about sort of that process emotionally that you went through?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about this a lot, but I remember when we were at that appointment with the doctor, I don't know if you ever experienced this, but it was one of those things where we went in to talk to her, and instead of going to a treatment room, she took us to her actual office with her desk and all of her diplomas, and she sat behind the desk, and it was kind of like the movies, almost like, oh, I didn't know that doctors actually did this. But I remember her bringing it up, and then I remember just like my vision, just like I went into tunnel vision. My eyes had so many tears in them that like I couldn't see. I was hot, like I was sobbing, and I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. Like, I'm not doing that. It wouldn't be my child. I can't, like, how could this be happening? I felt like all of my dreams of having a family, like, literally were being shattered in that moment. And in all honesty, I kind of was just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, this has to work. I can't think about that. And I really didn't think about it, to be honest. Michael was the one who really, he started doing research. He's a scientist, he's a researcher, like he's amazing when it comes to that. And so he hears that and he's like, well, I got to learn more about this. And so he's like, thinking about it, and I was like, no, we're not doing it. But then the more we started talking and the more I started thinking about it, and truly the more I think, like, in that moment, it was just a shock. It wasn't something I had ever thought about, and I didn't really know much about, but it's also not what I dreamed my family would be. Like, I didn't grow up egg donor to have a baby. Like, Uh, hang on, my internet. Am I breaking up?
You did a tiny bit, but you're
Okay,
back.
I'm back. Okay, sorry. Um, so I think like when I look at that moment and then I look at the time, so I like to like it took probably about 9 months from the time that the doctors told us that we were going to use a donor or that we should use a donor, think about it, to the time that we actually got matched to a donor and that we actually started that process. And that 9 months, looking on it, I at the but I was grieving during that time. I was grieving the loss of what I thought building my family was going to look like. I was grieving the loss of my own genetics, of like, I'm not going to pass down my family's double chin. I'm not going to, you know, my child may not look like me. Like I'm I'm not like all of the things that I had hoped for when I thought about having a baby, like getting to surprise my family or surprise my friends that we were pregnant, like those things were all gone because people knew we were going through infertility treatments. Our parents knew that. Like it wasn't a surprise that we were going through transfers. Um, and also just working through the trauma that I think infertility is, right? Like being poked and prodded, and my whole life was on hold because we were going to doctor's appointments and I was on all these hormones and just all the things that infertility does to us or takes from us. I hadn't processed those things emotionally. And so I really spent those 9 months working through those, processing them, so that by the time we got to the place where we were matched with a donor and we truly had to decide, like, is this the path we're going to go down, I was excited because it was hope. It was hope that this would work, and it was a new thing to try that we hadn't tried, and there was no evidence from my body or from like our diagnoses that donor egg wouldn't work for us. And so I was really excited about it. But it took a long, long time. It was not a like, you should use donor, and then we just went and did it.
And I think that's what's so powerful is hearing your story, because I think so often, and especially with social media, and even though you're obviously sharing this, so if anyone's not following Mado on Instagram, go and do so, and we'll put all the details and links in the show notes. But even following, you obviously, because now you're like, I'm a mom and I've had my kids through donor, and here we are.
Mhm.
And even though you're talking about your story and talking about what you've gone through, like on a regular basis, your feed, people could still like start joining, start following you and be like, all right, well, maybe she was always okay with the idea of donor. Maybe
Right.
like she just heard and was like, oh, yeah, it's fine. So to
Mhm.
hear what you went through, and the fact that your first reaction was like, no, freaking, like, no way,
Mhm.
just no.
Yeah.
And it shows as well that we can, things that we think are set in stone with our emotions and our beliefs can shift over and sometimes it needs time, sometimes it needs knowledge and education to truly understand what this means. Sometimes it's about grieving and letting go of what we thought we had and allowing ourselves to really grieve that rather than trying to go, oh, I'll be fine. We'll move on to the next stage and that will then make the last stage okay. I think it is
Mhm.
more this this bit hasn't worked, this treatment hasn't worked. Let's grieve that treatment. Because so often with the clinics, and they're obviously trying to support us and help us, and they're like, right, that didn't work. Here are your jabs for the next one, and they want us to keep going in the momentum. But physically and emotionally, we haven't had that time to go, oh, okay, that didn't work, and I really wanted it to work. And what does that mean if we're just 5 cycles back to back, which so many times clinics are doing now? They're doing maybe 3 fresh cycles and collecting eggs and then doing
Mhm.
frozen at the end, and it's like there's no breathing space in between.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that because I think like infertility, you hear about it and we talk about it as a journey. And I think sometimes that can be a little cliche, like, oh yeah, it's a journey. But I truly do believe that when you think about, in my mind, what is a journey? A journey is something that's not super fast. It takes time, and you have to stop and rest along a journey. Like, you you don't just go, 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 because if you do, then you're going to run out of gas, or you're going to run out of food, or you're going to run out of, whatever you need in order to sustain yourself. But I think so often, and I did this too on my own journey, where I was like, okay, that didn't work. What's next? What's next? What's next? And I never took the time to pause and grieve. And I think you do have to stop. And it's important to stop and acknowledge, I was hopeful that that was going to work. I was hopeful that I was going to work, and it didn't work. And that really sucks. Like, I am sad that I'm not pregnant this month. And 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 then at each then phase where you're doing a new type of treatment, like if you're going from being on Clomid to then going to IUI to then going to IVF to then maybe going to donor or ending up going to adoption or living child free, like at each of those kind of milestones or mile markers along the path, there's a grief process there. Because I think a lot of times, and people that I talk to say initially when they look forward, they say like, well, I'm never going to do that. And then you get to that point and you're like, well, but I still want to be a parent. And now I am going to do that. And so it's allowing yourself, and I've been talking about this recently, it's allowing yourself that space, that the timeline that you have in your head, like that's your timeline. No one's forcing you to go to the next one. Like, you can say, hey clinic, thanks, I need a break. Like, I want to take this month off because I need some time to process and work through some of the things that I've been going through. So I think you're spot on in that, like, you have to take the time to grieve those losses, because if you don't, you're going to burn out at some point. You're going to burn out.
And it can also feel, if you don't grieve each milestone, like you said, then you can get to like a huge one, like making the decision to go from your own eggs to donor, and suddenly the past however many years worth of holding it all in then all comes. So you're not just dealing with this new big thing, you've got all the stuff that comes before it as well. So taking that time all the way through, and also to really allow yourself that grieve is the right word. Because when I was trying to conceive, and my friend, this was before we'd even had a miscarriage, was just trying to conceive, hadn't done treatment or anything, and my friend was like, it sounds like you're grieving, like you're going through these 5 steps of denial, anger, bargaining, depression. And I was cycling through these 4 stages, and she was like, you'll come to this place of acceptance. You can't put a date on it. You can't say like, oh, cycle through grief in 5 weeks. You're gonna then come to this magical place of acceptance where everything you've been through is then okay and you can move on. It doesn't work like that. But I think knowing that you are grieving and knowing that acceptance is part of grief and is something that either with time or with coaching or with therapy or whatever it is that you need can help you get to that point. So it's not like it can guarantee or like get support and you can like bump through grief, get to acceptance quicker, but it can support you and it can give you the tools to allow yourself to move through each of the stages. So you move the anger, the bargaining, the depression, move through each of those stages with tools to help you. Because obviously with fertility, that there is this like ticking clock above our heads.
Right.
So if there was unlimited time, ideally you could say, it doesn't feel right now, but in 3 years it's going to feel perfect, come back then. Because obviously the clinic's like, see you next Tuesday at 3, and you're like, hang on. So totally. I think that's why it's so amazing, like the resources that you that you offer are giving people those tools.
Yeah. And I think the thing too that I always think about, at least in my own grief journey with infertility, but also just in other losses that I've had in my life, is that you cycle through those phases, but you don't cycle through them linearly. Is that a word? Linearly?
Yeah.
Um, and you also like acceptance, it can take a long time, maybe forever, for acceptance to be where you're always at, right? So like I know for me in processing my donor, like moving into donor, it was like there'd be moments where I'd be like, donors our way. I'm so excited. I can't wait. And then like maybe an hour later, I'd be like, I don't want to use donor. I'm so mad about this. Right. So I'm like jumping and going from the different phases of grief. Over time, it became more acceptance and less anger, more, like, and and now with our girls and them being here and knowing who they are, like I can't imagine going any other way. Like I know that these girls that are in our life like are they are exactly who they are meant to be and are here with us, and we were meant to be their parents. And I can't imagine life without any other children, right? Like cuz these are my children. But it takes time to get to that point too. So yeah.
And did it feel, on that note, could you kind of talk us through that, like this, when you were first pregnant with them, what was kind, this would obviously be different for everyone, but what was that kind of balance of feeling, feeling like, yes, this is meant to be, but part of you still being like, missing the fact that it you weren't pregnant with your own eggs? Was there, like, you just sort of talk us through each phase of your life, kind of what that looked like? Because I think for a lot of people it's that unknown. They're concerned of, what if I got pregnant with donor eggs and then I felt like the baby wasn't mine? Or what if I had a child and then I felt like, oh, they're not mine? Because they obviously can't imagine, when they're imagining it from their current state of mind,
Yeah.
they feel like they'll feel how they do today, but they'll be pregnant or a mum. And obviously that shifts over time. So if you could kind of contextualize that for us.
Yeah, so kind of the way that I like to think about it is from a broader perspective. Like genetics are a big deal. I'm not going to say that genetics aren't a big deal, because they are a big deal. They're a big deal because we talk about our whole society talks about like our children looking like their parents, or passing down some genetic trait, or like I mentioned earlier, the double chin or the blue eyes or the blonde hair or whatever. Genetics are also a big deal because they can define our medical history. So acknowledging that genetics are a big deal is important. From the perspective of being a parent to a donor conceived child and using donor eggs, I remember feeling as invested in my donor egg cycle as I did my IVF cycles using my own eggs. And when I say that, I mean like every monitoring appointment, was my lining getting good? Like, were my numbers looking good? Were her numbers looking good? How many follicles was she getting? I remember getting the phone call from the embryologist after her retrieval, hearing how many eggs we got, right? Like, I felt as emotionally invested in that conversation as I had felt in the ones about my own eggs. And I think at every step along the way with a donor cycle, you're putting, I like to picture it of like a jar of like, you're dropping like little moments that are connecting you to that child into that jar. So it's like, we get the call from the embryologist and they say like, oh, we got this many eggs. It's like, oh, thankfully, right? Like, thank goodness. And then you get the call like, okay, here's how many embryos we have. Like, oh, that's great. Okay, more in the jar. And then you go in for your transfer and it's like, wow, we have 2 amazing embryos. Like, we're going to transfer them. And it's like, whoa, okay, like in the jar. The 2-week wait was just as hard with the donor cycle as it was with the other, 7 or 8 cycles that I had done. The call about the positive beta like felt just as heavy as the other ones did. In the jar, the scans, the appointments, like all the things that start to attach you to that child from the very beginning of the process, you're emotionally invested. So a failed donor cycle does not hurt any less than a failed my own egg cycle, or if I was using donor sperm or donor embryo. It hurts the same. It hurts as much as. And so I think, like, yes, while I was pregnant, I was putting more things in the jar, right? Every ultrasound, every doctor's appointment, every time I felt them kick, like all the things, like I was putting things in the jar. I was still scared. I was still like, at times, like, okay, well, we're in this now. Like, I hope it works. Like, I hope it like ends up being okay. But the whole entire time, I felt like my body, and this is true, my body was nourishing those girls. My blood was running through them. My body was the one that was keeping them alive. I was growing them. And when they came out, I didn't know what my kids were going to look like. It's not like I had a picture of my kids before they were born, right? So when I saw them, I was like, well, you're mine. Like, this is my child. And those fears about them being donor conceived, like, slowly started to fade. I'll tell you, there are definitely times I do not think about them being donor conceived every day. I mean, I do because of the work that I do, being a donor conception coach and sharing my story all the time. Like, from that perspective, like, it's very much at the forefront of my mind. But like, in the mundane, everyday moments of waking up and being their mom and getting them breakfast and getting them to school and all the things that we do as parents, I do not look at them and go, oh, but you were donor conceived.
Yeah.
I look at them and go, well, you're my child and I love you. And I think the other piece of it too is that, like, there are still moments where they will say, they're almost 5. So they're at a place now where they say things like, I don't like you. I want to go find a new family. You're not my mom, right? Like, they say those things because kids say those things. And there can be brief moments where I think like, oh yeah, well, you're not mine.
Yeah.
But then it instantly goes away and is like, no, that's your insecurity, Maida. That's not the truth. The truth is that I am their mom. And if they don't like me, like, I'm probably doing my job because
Yeah, you're probably doing it right. There's that thing like, you shouldn't be friends with your kids. You should be their mom.
Yeah, like, you're not my best friend, mom. Well, no, I'm not your best friend. Like, that's not my job.
Eat your broccoli.
So I just, like, over time, and as you get to know these little humans that are coming into your life, like, those fears start to fade and the reality of life starts to sink in. And it's, at the time when I was going through it, I thought, there is no way that I'm going to be able to go through my life and not think about this at every moment of every single day. Now, I'm 5 years in now because they're almost 5. So, 5 years ago I was pregnant with them. Now I truly do not think about it most of the time in those mundane, in those times of parenting, and just living our lives as a family. It doesn't cross my mind. I don't think about it. So
thank you so much for sharing that for us and being so open with us, because I think that's what's so, why we're doing this interview. It's so important to open up the conversation around this and really have these deep conversations about it, like what the reality is, like what it actually looks like. And thank you as well for saying it's like in those moments where you have that it, you have that awareness that it's your insecurity, because however we conceive our children, there are going to be days where it's, that it's really tough. And sometimes as well, people can say to me, it's like, what if I go through all this treatment? What if I go through all of this to have my kids? And then either I just don't enjoy it, or I'm not very good at it. And these are fears that I think all of us have, on different scales, that we will have moments where we are just like, I'm crap at this, like I'm really, and we can then doubt, if we've struggled to conceive. I think we've got that huge extra pressure on ourselves that I wanted these kids like so much, so that impacts all of us. So it's so nice to hear these, the concerns that people have, having that spoken to is powerful. Just before
and
you, your
I
hair
think
is wrapped around your microphone. Could you just tuck it behind it? Maybe just tuck your hair behind, because
there
that's
we go.
cool.
No, I agree with you. And I think it's really important to just say some of those fears out loud, because I think we can feel maybe ashamed that we think those things, or
Mm.
that we shouldn't be thinking those things. And I know that, like, there are times where I struggle and parenting is hard, and I think like, well, it shouldn't be this way because I wanted them so bad, or I worked so hard to have them. But the other part of it too is when I think about like the donor conception piece, and I think about some of the people like the clients I talk to, you know, there's the pieces of it, like if someone's considering using a donor or thinking about picking a donor, people will say like, well, I just want them to be healthy, or I just want them to have a good, education background. It's okay. And I like to say this, like, it's okay to say like, I'd really like someone with blonde hair and blue eyes,
Yeah.
because I have blonde hair and blue eyes, and that sucks if they don't look like me. Like, I want them to look like me. Or like, it's really important to me that they come from this specific ethnic background, or they have this religion as part of them. Like, I think we can feel bad about some of those things. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge, like, and I talk to my clients about this and I work with them of saying, like, be honest with yourself about everything that you're feeling, and don't put parameters around how you're feeling. How you feel is how you feel, right? Like it's not right or wrong, it just is how you feel. Acknowledge that feeling, because if you try to push it down and you try to ignore it, it's just going to keep coming back and it's going to make you feel bad. So, like, acknowledge it and then start to work through it. And it's okay. The things that are important to you and your partner when you're thinking about building your family, or you're looking at choosing a donor, if you're going down that path, all of those things are okay. And there's no judgment, right or wrong. It is what it is. And you got to do what feels best from that perspective. So I think, I try really hard in my own life to acknowledge my feelings, not as a right feeling or a wrong feeling, but just as a feeling, and then move through it. So,
And that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's like, that's why my business is called Embrace Fertility, because it's about embracing all of it. So you can't say like, oh yeah, this is a negative feeling, let's push that away. This is a positive feeling, woohoo, let's go with that. It's like, or like you said, all our emotions are valid and are there, and certain things can be worked through and we can
mhm,
shift them, but embracing them and accepting them
right,
is so the first step.
right.
um so you mentioned about with Michael, so it'd be great to talk a bit about what if you were open to donor, but your partner wasn't, or vice versa? Can you just talk to us a little bit about how you might approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when you look at couples, you think about your own relationship, like we're two different people and we function differently. And for me, I am a like slow to change. I like to process things. I like to gather information. I like to think about it. I like to feel good about it, like feel in my body good about it, before I'm ready to make a decision. Michael is the complete opposite. So he's really quick at processing. He does the research, gets the information, and is like, okay, I've made my decision and move on. And he's like, he sees these things as like, okay, we need to make a decision about this. Like, let's do everything we need to do to make the decision, and then let's go. And I think the first and foremost, it's important to recognize how each person processes, right? And acknowledge that each person in the partnership processes things different, and to allow each other the space to process the way that you need to process. So we can't, like we've talked about, you can't force the grieving. You can't force the time. You can't say like, okay, 5 weeks from now, you're going to be in the exact spot that I want you to be in, right? And so I think like if you are the one who processes faster, where you need to be is you need to allow your partner space for them to go through their process cycle. If you're the one who's slower like I was, it's about being really open and having that honest communication. And for me, I would push myself a little bit. Michael would want to talk about it, so I'd be like, okay, let's talk about it. Hard for me, but let's talk about it. And then maybe 10 minutes in, I'd be like, okay, I'm done. Like I can't, I'm shutting off. I can't do anymore. And he was incredibly gracious to respect that about me and to say, okay, we'll pick it up, we'll pick it up again. So it's this like, it's a give and take, right? But it's really listening and acknowledging each other and acknowledging what their needs versus like trying to force someone. Oh, there goes my internet again.
Oh, you're good.
Versus forcing your partner to get somewhere faster than they're ready to, right? And it's compromising, and you may need to do some pushing to your partner, they may need to do some pulling of you. Like it's kind of a push and pull, I think. But again, it goes back to what you talked about earlier, which is allowing the space and the time to do that. And if it means pausing your treatment or taking a break or something like that, building a family is a partnership. It takes both of you to do it. So you got to both be similarly moving in the right direction. That's what I would say.
And that's something that you help couples with, isn't it? It's like giving them that space that they could come and have that session with you and have that safe space that you can kind of be guiding them through. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you work with people one-on-one?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of one-on-one coaching. A lot of it is just one-on-one sessions, usually with the couple. So working with the couple together, and just asking questions and allowing them that space to answer the question and helping them hear each other. So I think sometimes like when you're in a relationship and you're really close to someone, say something and you may just not hear it properly or hear it the way they're trying to communicate it. So as a neutral third party, like my goal is for my clients to make their decision, not my decision. I'm not interested whichever way they decide. Like I want to feel confident and good in decisions, whatever those decisions are. It to me, whether you choose donor or you say, you know what, like not where I'm like a win, right? Because you've at least gotten to a place of like, hey, I'm not here yet. So I do that with the other of my course too. I talk through things regarding really being intentional about with yourself and also with your partner of like, what are my core values in life, and what are my goals in life, and what are our goals as a family, and how do each of our values that we're bringing to this relationship or to this family align to what our individual and family goals are, and then being able to make your decisions and move forward in your fertility journey aligning to those goals and those values is where that like level of comfort and confidence in your decisions come from. Because I think like if you've ever been in a situation where you've been asked to do something outside of your values, outside of what feels comfortable to you, it's incredibly comfortable and you don't feel good about it. And our fertility journey, the decisions that we're making now have lifelong impacts, right? Like I'm choosing to use a donor to build my family. Like that has a lifelong impact on me, on my child, on my family. And so I want to make sure that people are feeling really good and comfortable about those decisions now so that they don't carry the shame or the guilt or the pain with them into their whole family life or the next phase of their family life. Um, so yeah, I love working with couples. I love working with everyone that I work with. But I love working with couples because it's so fun. A lot of times they're already doing those things. They just haven't had kind of a framework or a way to identify them. And then the other piece too is I ask questions and I really push them to have difficult conversations with each other. And in doing so, I mean, some of the feedback I've gotten back is like, we've never had this honest of a conversation in our relationship before. Like your guidance, your prompts, your encouragement has allowed us to not only have a conversation about fertility, but it's opened up deeper conversations about what we want out of life in general. And that just like warms my heart. Like I just get so excited about that.
And I think that's the thing is you create a very safe, calming space as well. Like talking to you as well and listening to you, like, well, I watch your videos and things like on IGTV, which is very, you bring that calmness to it. And I think sometimes especially if we've like first been told maybe you should maybe consider going to donor eggs, people are in such high levels of stress and feeling very, very unsafe. So having a safe space to come to that you can really just go, anything goes, you can say anything, there's no feelings or words off the table, like let's bring it all here.
Right.
Such a powerful thing for people to bring. Could you tell us a bit more about the download your course?
The donor download, yeah. So the donor download, it's a 6-week course. I run it a couple times a year. And basically what it is it's broken down into 3 modules. So to your point, Naomi, like a lot of times when people come to me, they're in a really high state of stress, right? They've been experiencing a lot of stress. Their body's in stress, their mind is stressed, and they're being faced with a very big decision. And and I've learned some of these things from you and listening to your podcast and talking to you, but our brains can't make rational decisions when we have so much stress and we're in this like very high stress state. So the first thing we work on is really coming down from that stress state and really, getting to a point where we're starting to access our rational brain and function in a way where we can start to make like true rational decisions. And so we spend some time doing that. And then the next part of it is we spend some time, really what I talked about, talking about our values, talking about our goals, and how we're aligning our decision into using a donor. Because a lot of times people come to me and they're not sure if donor is the right path for them, or maybe they're in a place where they've been told that donor is the right path, they want it, but they're really scared to do it, and they're uncomfortable, and they're just not, they haven't really been able to work through those things in their mind yet. And so we spend some time working through those fears and those feelings around donor to get to a place where you're feeling like, my goal isn't to get to a place where you're no longer grieving. My goal is to get you to a place where you're more in acceptance, you're working through that grief and you're processing through that grief so that you can then move forward. Um, and then the last part of the course is we spend time talking about kind of the nitty gritty of a donor process. Like, how do I find a donor? If I need to use donor egg, donor sperm, donor embryo, how do I do that? Looking at the new science of epigenetics and how epigenetics plays a role in the development of the child when they're in the womb, and how, like, you as the mom are going to pass traits and turn genes on and turn genes off because they're in your body versus someone else's body. So we talk through that a little bit as well. And then we have a couple group coaching sessions where we jump on a call together, and I'm open book for answering questions or just talking about things that are on people's minds. Maybe it's related to what we're talking about in the course. Um, Sometimes it's like, hey, we found 3 donors that we like. We don't know how to make the decision. What suggestions do you have? Right. So it can be really practical, or it can be really whatever my clients need. Um, and then I have a Facebook group as part of it too. So really trying to foster community and helping other people meet other people that are going through something that they're going through. Because I think that's, for me, that was one of the parts that was so hard. I didn't know anyone who was going through donor. Like, I thought I was all alone. I thought I was this like anomaly that was the only one. And it's not true. There's so many people who are going through this. And so just being able to build that community and connection with other people, I think can really make a big difference in how you go through this journey as well. So um, I bring all of those together. I've got some really cool bonuses as part of it too. I don't know. It's such an amazing experience to go through, and it's something that I created because I wish I had had this when I was going through it, and so wanting to help provide that to other people too. So
Thank you so much. And do you have a freebie for people? So maybe people are just, this is something that's maybe, they're just right maybe at the very start of this, or they're just sort of just want to know like a little bit more, just sort of get in. How do you recommend people start? Do you have a mailing list? Can you tell us about where
yes.
you are on social?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm probably, from a social media perspective, I'm the most active. So I'm at Maida Getman on social media and or on Instagram. And then yes, I have an awesome freebie. It's called the Essential Donor Checklist. It's totally free. You can get it by either going to my Instagram page or right to my website, maidagetman.com. And it's a free resource. And what it is it's a bunch of questions to start asking yourself, asking your doctor, asking your partner, whether you're just starting out on this journey or you're thinking, maybe donor is something I want to look at. It's a great resource. It's also a great resource if you're like, well, we decided to use donor, but we didn't think about it much, and now we're going to start thinking about it. Like, it will help you whatever stage you're at, and it's totally free. And I would love for you to go grab it because I think it'll really help you. So head on over and grab that too.
Fantastic. I'm going to put all the notes underneath the podcast so people know how to get in touch with you. Is there anything else that we've forgotten that we should have talked about?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. I love Embrace Fertility and I love what you do. And I It's one of my favorite podcasts, so I'm like so thrilled to be on it. I can't believe it. It's like a dream. But anyway, I would love to just connect with anyone who's interested. Happy to answer questions, and just know that I'm available and a resource for you, if even if you just need a place to start. So thank
Fantastic.
you.
Oh, and this has been so lovely. Thank you for being so open and telling us about your own experiences, because I know that's what my listeners really appreciate with guests coming on. It's just getting another perspective and just having, it's been so knowledgeable, so much knowledge and so inspiring. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks.
And if this is the first time listening, then please do subscribe to the Embrace Fertility podcast, and then you'll be the first to know when new episodes come live. We would love it if you could give us a star rating and ideally an amazing review of how you have found this podcast, because it helps the word get out and other people to know what the podcast is all about. And you can pop over to my website, embracefertility.co.uk, and download 3 ways to stress less and enhance your fertility using the mind body link. And these techniques are applicable as well, even if you're going through treatment, if you're going through donor, even if you're considering adoption, because there are ways that you can help calm your body, bring yourself out of that intense stress mode. So one of them is just a 3-minute meditation MP3 you can listen to, and then there's the first chapter of my upcoming book where I talk about the science of the mind body link. And what is the third thing? A beautiful heart anchor meditation. So do go and check all of that out at embracefertility.co.uk, and we'll see you next time. Bye.